So our next guest is Clayton Banks. He's the founder of Silicon Harlem, a cause that is very near and dear to my heart. And Clayton's a very good friend. He's a friend of Bold.
Got a great name.
Clay
Reminds me of
Clayton.
someone.
So Silicon Harlem, we'll let him tell more about it, but Silicon Harlem is really dedicated to trying to, solve a lot of these problems that we see in our urban communities. He's specifically focused on Harlem, but I know that he believes that this is something that they're doing in Harlem can be reproduced in urban areas all over the country. And they've got a conference coming on October 21st. Let's hear more about it. Welcome, Clayton.
Well, thank you, Carrie. It's always great to be with you. And I've had a chance to sit and listen to your show, and I wish I could be on it every day. I mean, you guys are amazing. It's a great chemistry, and as Clay can said, we've got two Clays on set.
I don't know if we can handle all this.
That's
Clay
like
Nation.
We got the majority now.
we have the majority finally. But one of the things that is really key to a lot of the topics that I think are being discussed on this show, and that you'll be discussing on into the future, none of it really sort of gets where we need our public to get without what I consider the most vital asset in our country, which is broadband. Being able to make sure that every single household, business, nonprofit, etc., is 100% connected. And on October 21st, when we do launch our conference, one of the initiatives we'll be announcing is, and I'll do this breaking news on this beautiful show, that by 2025, Silicon Harlem has set up an initiative to make sure that every household and every business in Upper Manhattan has a broadband connection, an affordable broadband connection, because there's 20 to 25% of the households in Harlem that have zero connection. You guys have been talking a little bit about education. Young people, 90% of your homework requires an internet connection. If you don't have it, and you walk around Harlem around 3:30, 4 o'clock, you'll see young people standing outside of libraries and Starbucks trying to get an internet connection just to finish their homework. The FCC calls that a homework gap. So we have to close that. If we really want all of these great things that you're talking about on the show to come to fruition, fairness and equitable distribution of services and quality of life, it starts with this fundamental thing called broadband. And we know when we called our upcoming conference Broadband Matters, it sort of went over a lot of people's head, like, what the heck are they talking about?
We picked up on it.
That's good, because it does. It affects, look at senior citizens trying to manage their health when all health records have been moved online. Look at education. I talked about the homework gap. You can look at employment. It's hard to get a job if you don't have an online connection. You have to literally apply online to most companies. So this, for us, is critical, not only just in Harlem, but across the nation. We think it also has an impact on government. Government is committed to having all records and all services pretty much in the digital space. So when you think about that, you can leave communities behind. I'm old enough to know, Clay, so I got the first Clay before you. I'm a little older.
Copy Clay.
Not too
You're
far
a
ahead of me.
copy,
But think about it. When I started off in the cable industry, and when we started rolling out cable, the first areas we would go to are affluent areas, because you have to make your money back as soon as possible when you lay out that much capital. Well, Larry Irving of the Clinton administration called that a digital divide. When internet came along, same thing. Companies went into those neighborhoods that could afford it, and some people in these emerging communities were not getting it. That furthered the digital divide. We're going into a new era of both broadband and Internet of Things and smart city and all of this stuff. Without the inclusion, you create even more a divide. And by the way, it's not only racially, but it's economic. So when you see the disgruntled people that we see, even in the electorate, for me, you can point to the fact that these divides have been created as a result of us not having an inclusive strategy towards technology.
Right. And so that's why
So-
you named your conference Broadband Matters.
That's
It's
exactly
sort of
right.
a nod to Black Lives Matter, which is talking about how do we address these problems in our urban areas. What do you see? I know with Silicon Harlem, and I'm very involved and passionate about what you guys do, but from your perspective, what's the biggest kind of obstructions or obstacles that people of color and people in Harlem are facing to start a business, to get the capital they need, to basically launch a technology startup?
That's a great question. So Pew Research did a lot of studies on these type of issues, and even though 75 to 80%, whether you have a connection or not, whether you have a business or not, agree that having access to the internet is critical. But yet there's a large percent of those people that don't have any type of connection. So I think, and so the Pew Research also showed that what's the reason for that? And the reason for that is cost. That's the majority of the reason why people don't have an internet connection. In New York, there's 400,000 homes that are on some sort of payment plan with Con Ed. What that tells you is that utilities can keep you poor, right? Just paying your bills, fundamental bills can keep you poor. As they say in North Carolina, it's expensive to be poor. So to your question, capital is critical. Jesse Jackson says to me, it's amazing that Wall Street and Harlem are on the same island and they're not connecting. And that's one of the issues that we have. We have to start attracting capital into Upper Manhattan. We certainly have to sort of take a long tail approach to this, where we start in the education system, get our young people interested in a STEM background so that they can look at 21st century jobs that's going to require technology literacy. We have to create the pipeline. Not everyone's going to be an entrepreneur, but we have to have people thinking, I don't have to go to Silicon Valley to be successful. I can literally root myself in New York City, and particularly uptown, and have a great quality of life and raise a family. So that means we have to also attract companies into Harlem. And we're doing that. We have a WeWork opening. Clay knows we have the Whole Foods opening. We have all types of great things going on in Harlem. But with that growth, we also have a responsibility, right? So that great growth means there's going to be more people, more traffic, more garbage. So, our government officials need to take a vested interest in what we're doing in Harlem.
The reason why I really commend and love Silicon Harlem is because I feel like, you're talking about children and educating them and trying to get them interested in STEM and have teachers teach them about those different topics. But the thing is, when children don't see other people or adults that look like them working in these fields, it becomes something that's not accessible mentally, right? So I think that adding that layer of visibility and bringing in Black entrepreneurs and Black engineers, Black and brown people that work in these fields is so critical to our children, to show them like, look, you can live in Harlem and work at Google. You can live in Harlem and even aspire to work at Yahoo. I mean, these companies right now have very low percentages of people of color working there, and it's something that our children do not even aspire to because of the demographics right now.
That's a great point. And, the reality is, if you go into Google and you talk to a bunch of the employees there or any other tech company, guess what? Not everyone has a computer science degree, and not everyone has an engineering degree. So those companies are set up in a way where, you can say a lot of these companies started in areas where there's not a lot of diversity. A great solution is put a regional office in Harlem. A great example is Apple just did that. When Jesse Jackson went out there, started talking to them, they ended up opening an office in Oakland. Now all of a sudden they have their numbers go up. But your great point is, we just had a company move into Harlem that was downtown called Uncharted Play. Maybe going to be the first billion-dollar business in Harlem, in my opinion. Ran by a 28-year-old African-American woman who's got 12 patents, is democratizing energy, one of the smartest people I've met, quite talented, accessible. She moved her company in Harlem in early part of the summer, has already spent $150,000 in Harlem, just hiring local talent and everything. So young people can look at that example. And whether she was African-American or anything else, in my opinion, there's a woman.
We're going to get her on Bold Blend soon.
And there you go. We're going to get bold up there. So the energy is there. It doesn't, in a lot of ways, even though optics matter, as your point, and having a young lady like that with that kind of energy and devoted to being a part of the solution really helps for young people. And she's opening up. She actually is transforming a whole brownstone in Harlem and wants to invite kids to come in and actually see how they work. She's the one who invented the socket ball, which is gone across the world.
Let me ask a fundamental question that's going to make you mad. Arguably the taxpayer money didn't go to create electricity. Taxpayer money didn't go to create oil. But taxpayer money created the internet. Taxpayer money created broadband, still owns these broadbands and gives them away to private companies. Why are we giving this away to private companies to profit off of when it's taxpayer? I mean, these people who don't have access or are part of creating, or their tax money created the internet, and yet they can't afford to pay for it. What's the argument there for why they do
Well,
that?
the argument is that where Kerry would step in and say is government's not necessarily good at all these type of things. And the private sector has played a significant role in transforming our nation from an analog world to a digital world. But to your point, Clay, it's not sustainable. In order for us to really make sure that every single person has these fundamental rights, cities, states have to start involving themselves in the actual rollout of these type of services. So you're seeing cities like Chattanooga, Tennessee, that decided to create a broadband solution themselves.
But to your point, Clay, because a lot of cities have been trying to do it. Like where I went to college, Provo, Utah, they've actually had enormous problems. They were doing this thing called iProvo, where they wanted to have the entire city wired with broadband. It's been way over cost, way underperforming.
Well, it's double dipping
It's
too,
like,
because I paid my tax money to create the internet, and I'm going to pay my tax money to give it to everybody else too. So it's a double dip thing, and I would love to get into this for hours and hours and hours. But thank you very much
Yes.
in general. What you're doing in Harlem is incredible.
SiliconHarlem.net. Anyone can go there and get information about the actual conference, and we're hoping that we already know Kerry's going to be there, and we hope Clay Aiken will visit us, and
Black
certainly
Enterprise, hopefully.
this lovely, extraordinary star will be hopefully at the conference as well, October 21st.
Great.
People can SiliconHarlem.net.
That's right. October 21st. We'll see you
Thank
there.
you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks, Clay.